You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I am so pleased to have guest Josh Swanson on with us today. I follow Josh's Substack, and it's non-anonymous.
That's
and
right.
I absolutely love it. Josh, thank you and welcome to the show.
Tim, thanks for having me. I know we followed each other, and I'm really grateful to be here. Excited for the conversation.
I am so thrilled to have you. I reached out to you because we're both Substackers, and I loved this article that you wrote about your father's passing, about your long-term sobriety, your experience. So I'm so thrilled to have you on the show so you can, share your experience with all the viewers. What led you to do this whole article about goodbye letters and about this relationship with your father and shame and all this great stuff that's in there? What led you to write that?
Yeah, really, it was. Thank you, and again, thank you for having me. And your platform is amazing for people not only in recovery but that are seeking and looking and trying to find a way. So thank you for doing what you do. Really, it came about during COVID, during a time when we all had time to sit around and not do a whole lot. A lot of this writing came out, and there was a lot of things I had inside that I really wanted to get out, and through some conversations and some of the things in my life that I'd been through, one of them being my dad committing suicide when I was 9 years old, was how I dealt with grief, trauma, and recovery and addiction. And so I had found out through just the loss that I'd been through that there were some things that tools I'd taken on, more or less. And one of those tools was writing a goodbye letter. And originally those goodbye letters were to people, and they've kind of made their way into things that no longer really serve me. And so they really work in a lot of different ways. But that's how the original idea kind of came about, was just through that.
What I really responded to when I read this is it really, your piece really spoke to me for a couple different reasons. We both got sober in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
which we were just talking about was an, alternative universe for people who are now getting sober.
Yeah.
How different it was, just the whole attitude of it all, right?
Yeah.
But what I love is that you wove in what really worked, I found, in the amends process in a 12-step program, kind of a new way of looking at that, or a new way of approaching that. I remember, Josh, asking that question in the whole amends recovery process of, what if I can't reach out to the person? What if they've passed? What if it's just, I'm not able to, right? What if they don't respond?
Mm-hmm.
And writing letters was a big part of that. And I remember I had to write a couple of letters that were burned by my sponsor, and he's like, you don't need to write this.
Yeah.
Right. And for me as a dyslexic kid, who has a hard time not typing, I have to, I can't really write well, I have to type it. It was a struggle, and he made me write it because there's something about that, right? About the whole texture part of that. But what I found, what I really loved, and I'd love for you to speak and share about, is that whole process of this non-completion, right? And so many people have this, and I know men do, especially in 12-step programs. They get in and they feel like they've done everything that they can do, but there's this stuff that's left unsaid, and it's not really cleaned up. It's not really present in everyday life either. It's kind of what I'm going to call hanging on.
Yeah.
It's hanging on, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't serve us. What was the process for you to identify that? Because I think the emotional sobriety of it all is so amazing that you had this ability to really hone in and say, hey, this is what's still here that shouldn't be here.
Yes, all of it. Yes. you and I did get sober in a time when it was way different than today, and things that are talked about today weren't talked about then. And where the goodbye letters really originated for me, um, you know, somewhat as a kid and sitting in a therapist office, and I've done a ton of therapy and I've done a lot of coaching, and there I had a great coach just before COVID, and we really kind of dug into this idea of goodbye letters, and then being more than just about saying goodbye to people that had passed, and getting to say all the things that we didn't get to say, and so some of that became uh, these traits or these things about ourselves that no longer served us, and so just for instance, I mean, I got divorced probably about 12 years ago, and there was a lot in that I went through personally with my kids and whatnot, that while I didn't go back out and drink again, there was a lot in there that I had to work through. And so it was a goodbye to an idea of a marriage, or a goodbye to an idea of what I had done to this other person. And more recently, there were some things that had come up about my sister passing about 8 or 9 years ago, and really about how I didn't feel like I was the big brother that she had deserved, which may or may not be true. I don't know. For me, it felt that way, and so I really just had to write her another letter, or really for myself, uh, the idea that I didn't live up to the expectation that I thought I should have. And so when we talk about making amends, it's not only amends to other people that these are great for, it's amends to ourselves. And really the ability to get out some feelings and some things that, while we might want to say it to somebody else, that person A may not be here, or B, it may really damage the relationship, because the part of that step you talk about is we would make it amends, except when to do so would injure them, or ourselves or others. And that's kind of where that came from. Let's get it out, that not injure ourselves or others in the process.
You know, we were talking a little bit earlier about shame, and I think
Mhm.
whether you meant to do this or not, for me, the article really clarified the definition of shame, because
Mm.
and here's my experience, like, doing the amends process, and not just in 12 step group, but just people do this in everyday life. We're not the only people, alcoholics,
Yeah.
drug addicts in recovery. We're not the only people that have to make amends, clean things up. That This is a human condition that I found. I thought I was tragically unique. It's a human condition. There are people that have never had an addiction problem that have to do this, right?
Yeah.
Many people do. Everybody does, really. So, uh, but in the process of alcoholics doing it and looking at my own recovery, there were things that were very black and white, of like, I did this and behaved this way because I was an alcoholic. And honestly, I didn't know better.
Mm.
But now I know better. And my amends is, one, yeah, I'm going to make it right and say my apologies. But then moving forward, I'm not going to act like that anymore.
Right.
Now, that was a large majority of the things on that list for me.
Hmm.
But there were other things that, like you were talking about with your article, that fell through the cracks. And I couldn't really identify those. Later, I found that I would have these feelings, and I thought they were feelings of guilt. And I was like, I must be doing it wrong because I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. I've taken the direction. I've done it. You know what I mean? But I still have it. And I realized that I had my little P-touch labeler in sobriety wrong. I was labeling that as guilt
Mm.
and being confused by why I was still good, right? It was really shame. And, later we've had George Snyder, who's great on the show, and Kevin, and a bunch of people that talk about shame, is that, shame is much different than guilt, because shame is, who you think you are, what you think
Mhm.
about yourself, not what you think about what other people are thinking, right? What you think of yourself. And I
Yeah.
had to really identify that I had these core beliefs about myself that were not correct. I mean, what's your experience with that?
That's a great It's a great setup because I couldn't agree more with you. I think that, we talk a lot about guilt, but we don't talk a lot about shame. And shame for me is that big shadow self, or those things that we kind of, as I like to say it, when the lights go out and the room gets real quiet, it's those things that still haunt our brain at night. And so, really, um the way non-anonymous and the way the shame conversation came about is through a lot of these conversations, but really getting people to step out of the shadows of their shame and into what's going to serve them. And so the way I use it, when I coach people or have conversations with people, the way I use it is as a way to say it served us in some way. Whatever that shame is those things that we held on to served us in a way to get us to where we are today, and they may no longer serve us today. So let's package them up and put them in a corner and say goodbye to them. Is really where that came down to. And so, for instance, there's a lady that I coached, and her mom as a kid told her that it was a good thing she was pretty and funny because she wasn't very smart. Now, she's in her mid 50s at this point, and this is a core belief of hers. And we just rolled through a 12-week coaching program. And at the end of it, one of the things I do is we write these goodbye letters, 3 or 4 of them, to these different preconceived thoughts that we have that served us. This is a thought she still had in her mid 50s from something her mom told her when she was a kid. And so we wrote a goodbye letter to that idea. And to watch the transformation of I can tell you about my own, but I identify with it more than other people and seeing them go through it. To watch her go through this process and to turn this corner and drop this core belief, it's all in putting that out, it's all I ever wanted was to see that.
I'm so glad that you said that and shared that experience that she had, because I think I call it stuck in the church basement.
Mm.
There's a lot of people that get sober, and God bless you for getting sober. And if that's all you can do at this moment, you're right on track. It's fine. Right. Like, so
Yeah.
I'm not negatively commenting on that, just getting sober, but the journey of just getting sober. And then once you're physically sober and once you have the physical sobriety, look, we know, and you write in the article, it is an emotional game. This is an emotional game. This is about understanding ourselves and growth, emotional growth.
Yeah.
And what I super love about what you're writing and what we're talking about here is that I believe this is the key to your best recovered life. And why we did this podcast is that you have to ask these questions. And I'll tell you why we're so much like the article that you wrote is I had one of these,
Mm.
for me, it wasn't a coach. I'd gone to this seminar, which I won't name, but it was a very popular thing. And I went and I wanted to go for a career. But what I got out of it was a relationship that I had had in my family that I was holding on to even 6, 7, 8 years of sobriety. I was about 6 at that time, thinking that there was and it was shame. What it was a shame. And I was unwilling to let it go because I was unable to identify it. I couldn't
Mm.
let go what I didn't understand. I didn't even know what I was letting go. Right. I just knew it didn't feel right. And I
Yeah.
remember for me, it wasn't a letter. It was an actual call. And I said everything I needed to say. And I was able to let that go. And literally my life, I could go right, Josh, I could go right back there right now to where I was. I was on Gower Street in Hollywood. I just moved here. There was a shift in
Yeah.
my life when I hung up the phone. There was a
Mm.
shift. And what that was, looking back on it now, of having having the blessing of being able to work with other people getting sober, is that was me letting go of this old idea that had nothing to do with me. It had nothing, it had haunted me all the way through my life. It had
Yeah.
nothing to do with me, Josh. And I hope that people get that in their sobriety. If you do this long enough, you will have those aha moments, not to steal from Oprah Winfrey, but right? You
Yeah,
have
for
these
sure.
aha moments. It's like,
Yeah.
look, this has nothing to do with this was just an interpretation I got when I was a kid. Now, what's my role? I believed it, man. I
Mm.
believed it, but it's not true. I've run it by other people. It's not true. I've run it by professionals. It's not true. It's time for me to let go. How do you do that? Because a lot of people are going to ask Josh, yeah, this is great. You identify it. Great. You get it. You write the letter, but how do you really cut that rope and just say, you know what? I'm letting go.
Yeah. Um, are you familiar with Byron Katie at all and her
I
work?
love Byron Katie. I
Yeah.
love Byron Katie. Yeah.
I'm a big believer in her four questions.
Yeah.
Is it true? Can you prove in a court of law that it's true? What would you be without this thought? And what would you replace it with? They're essentially
Yeah. Yeah.
those four core questions. And 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 I didn't find this, probably like you, I didn't find this on my own. Somebody showed it to me. And so, those four questions have become a core part of my life. I don't know how I originally found it. I went through a men's cohort a few years back with some guys that I became really, really close to. And what it reminded me of was early home group meetings that we had, men's home group meetings that I had early on in sobriety. And it brought all of that back to where we were all dealing with these different feelings of shame in our lives that we had not dealt with, that we held on. One of my core beliefs for a long, long time was that everybody that loves me leaves. My dad committed suicide at 9. My grandfather's passed away when I was 12 years old. We had another close family friend die right in that time. I had my sister died, and my grandmother died a few years ago. And so I had this core belief that that was it. And through that group and in coaching, it was really shown to me that that's not true. That's the story I had told myself that served me in a big way, but it wasn't true. And I'm a seeker. And so I would seek a lot of these ideas out to prove or disprove their value and their worth. That's just one. That was really one of the big ideas that came about. I To expand on what you were saying through sobriety, I think that, Damon, we get sober, and for a lot of people, that's what they can do, and that's getting sober is a big deal for a lot of people. Staying sober is a big deal as well. And as we were talking before we came on here, I think that as we stay sober, the challenge becomes the work, and as they tell us that the quality of our problems might not get better, but they're going to get different. And so do we choose to deal with these as we continue on, or do we just let them hang on? And you mentioned emotional sobriety. I've just been a seeker in trying to um, take all of that head on as much as possible. I'm not perfect at it by any means, but it's something I love to dig into. I love to talk about. I love to have these conversations about it.
I think ultimately, Josh, this is the conversation. I
Yeah.
think, you're talking about truths, and I found this with men too, is that men have is weird. I actually Kevin O, who comes on the program every once in a while, was my first 12-step sponsor in San Francisco 30, almost going to be now 32 years ago, right? So it's interesting
Congratulations.
to have, thank you, to have this relationship with him for all that period of time. So if you're listening, shout out. But it's interesting because I remember him telling me, hey, that's shame, that's displaced. This doesn't belong to you, right? Like this doesn't belong. This is a misinterpretation. Even
Mhm.
then, you know, um, being able to kind of grow with that over the years, like an onion. And you talk about being a seeker and Byron Katie and all that stuff. I love all of that because being a seeker, I think, keeps you sober
Mm,
because you have to keep sobriety isn't, it's really like peeling an onion that never ends.
I love that.
It's
Yeah.
like you're always peeling a layer, right? It's like a snake constantly shedding, right? Or my husky, which is proved probably by the hair on my shirt here, right?
Yeah.
My dog, my husky June sheds like crazy, just constantly, right? And that's what I feel like almost like your sobriety has to be that It's got to be this thing where you're constantly looking at it, letting go of things that no longer work for you. You know, I got to ask you, Josh, out of your whole process in recovery, what's the result of being, like you talked about your ex-wife and being able to identify, being able to let go of that thought, and the thing that you wrote about with your dad? What is
Mhm.
the result that people get actually from looking at life and practicing this in their own sobriety? What are the things that happen as a result of that?
Um, Boy, that's a good one. It's probably more time than we got to really answer that one, don't you think?
Probably.
Yeah, I think that I think the word for me that comes about is resilient. And I didn't suffer or go through these things alone. I mean, I had a mom that went through these things as well. I mean, and a sister, and at the core of it, my mom is a survivor, and that's probably the biggest thing I took from her is being a survivor. It's probably the biggest quality she's passed on to me. And so it's inherent in me to find things to, as extreme as it sounds, just survive. So for my own well-being, this goodbye letters is a way for me to just continue to be resilient and survive. And what it gives me is is a level of peace that uh you were talking. I want to ask you a question in a minute, because you've mentioned a couple of times these things that you dealt with that were shameful, that no longer served you, that you let go. But I want to hear how they served you up to the point when you had to let them go, because I think that's like the gold in there. Um, and so up to that point, these things serve us till they no longer do. And that's the point where I think that I just tried to put some words around what that may look like, or a process to let those things go. There's people who are very well educated, very emotionally in tune with themselves, that do this naturally. I'm not one of those people. I need a process to be able to do this. And that's what it gives me, is it gives me a process to say, okay, this thing, whatever it is, I can set it on the table and look at it. That no longer, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to be that kind of person anymore. I don't want to have that trait in my life anymore. Let's show what it did for us, and then go on. I mean, there's a lot of things we do to just survive. Uh, for instance, our brains, when traumatic events happens, our brains will black out a lot of the things that happen to us, so that we can just survive. So if we took it all on, it would almost kill us. Um, a lot of those things, eventually, as we deal with it, will actually, a lot of the details will come back, when we're able to slow down, process it out, and do all that. And that's all this really is it's just about, any of us that have dealt with any of this big stuff, it's about creating a process to just let it go and get it out, and try to get us to level up, to be better friends, to be better parents, be better husbands or wives, just better people.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've seen in my own life, and especially working with others, is that people that are unwilling to let go in recovery. I remember somebody saying, it's like, I'm a big horse person. I love riding
Mm,
horses. And,
yeah.
and obviously everybody's fear when riding horses is getting drugged. No one wants to get drugged by a horse.
Well,
And, and I remember just saying, let go. You just
yeah.
got to let go of it. Like, if you want to, if you hold on so tightly to these ideas of who you think you are, many times it's like being drugged by a horse. You're just going to get
Mm,
drugged and trampled by the horse
yeah.
time and time and time again. And you learn when you're horseback riding is that, at some point you got to let go. You're getting off the horse, right? Like at some point you just got to let go. And this is sobriety so much as just getting drugged until honestly,
It
I hate to
is.
say it,
It
but for
is.
me, it was not for everybody, but for me, it's just getting drug until I was saying, you know what? I think maybe it would be a good idea to let go of the reins,
No.
and I don't have to be drug anymore. I don't need to be drug, this is such an interesting process. This has been super fascinating. I think one of the things I've seen in is that if you hold on so tightly to these ideas of who you think you are, which many times, what you're talking about with Byron Katie and all this, are brought on by trauma,
Right.
right? and we're also in recovery,
Mhm.
which makes it complicated. We're trying to apply all this stuff in one lens, one view, and it's not, can't always be done like that. But one of the things that if you don't let go of the reins, I find is that you will bring in people like you're talking about this person you coached. She will bring into people in her life, people that will only value her for the way that she looks, right? And this
Yeah.
will be your existence, and you'll wonder, why won't things change? Why
Mhm.
can't I have a good career? Why can't I have this? It's because you won't really let go of something that does not work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's one of my dear friends is a gentleman named Cal Callahan. He has a podcast called The Great Unlearn, and his group was Unlearn X, and his whole method is unlearning all these things that we learned as we grow up and became men, and now we realize these things don't serve us anymore. It's along that same realization that I started non-anonymous, which is a core belief is everybody's getting sober from something. I mean, that's just the buzzword sober. It's become kind of a buzzword for a lot of people, and for some in the program, it offends them. For me, it's great. You're able to put a context around what's really going on. And now that we have that context, we can actually have a real conversation uh, about things that we're talking about the shame and about the guilt and about life lessons and things that we want to set aside. And that's really where the conversation starts. And so if we can just get to that point, um, we can start to have these conversations that you and I want to have more and more.
Love that. Love that. So you guys can get a hold of Josh Swanson. We're going to put all of the links in Recovered Life TV here, guys. We're also going to tag him because we're also on Substack on Recovered Life TV. So we're going to tag him into this as an author. So you can find out more about Josh, more about what he's doing in recovery, how he works with people, and also his Substack, which I would definitely recommend. Hey, hit a like, follow him, get on there and follow it. Final thoughts, Josh, on writing goodbye letters, being able to let go. Maybe somebody sitting listening to this and saying, man, what Josh is talking about is what I have to do, but I'm just too darn scared to do it. What would be your message to them?
There's power in pen to the paper, as we were talking about earlier. The first sentence is the hardest one to write. If you've got something that you feel like you're ready to let go of, don't be afraid to put it down on paper. Write it out. It's nobody else is going to see it but you. And there's a lot of magic in letting that stuff go. And if you need help or you need a form or a way to do it, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to have these conversations as Damon does as well. And I'm so grateful you had me on. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, guys. Josh Swanson, thank you so much. We're going to put all of the links to Non-Anonymous and how you can get a hold of Josh, and we'll have you back on the show, Josh. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
Thank
Everybody
you.
go out and live your best recovered life.
Hey, if you like this episode, think about supporting us by becoming a Recovered Life Plus member. At Recovered Life TV, we're not just delivering premium recovery resources, we're empowering you with the knowledge and tools that make a real difference in the quality of your recovery. By subscribing, you gain access to ad-free content, expert insights, exclusive video and audio segments, special projects, plus so much more, all while supporting our mission to spread the recovery message far and wide. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding or stay updated on the latest addiction and mental health recovery trends, Recovered Life Plus is for you. Subscribe now and start living your best recovered life. Just go to recoveredlife.tv and become a Plus member today.